Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to the CO visit. Colin here, and my trusty coffee, always. Well, interesting theme about why there's such a prevalence of people attempting to take their own lives or doing so among Christians. So first of all, I'm going to speak a bit more in general terms, but will be specific. So this is a very, very good topic for Jehovah's Witnesses to listen to, but Christians in general. Much of the stigma and the ignorance in general about the causes and the reasons has been fueled by religion. Religion in the hands of man is largely responsible due to the desire to control people, the desire to have money and keep a group of people within your control. So the misinterpretations, whether that be intentional or not, I would lean more towards intentional, because if the end game is really to influence people and control them, then of course this topic is always going to be shown in a very negative light, and it's going to be used for condemnation, it's going to be used for guilt, because heaven forbid we look at this from the perspective of grace and compassion and try to understand what's going on in the world, the psychology behind a person who gets to a point where they simply don't want to go on anymore. And throughout our history, throughout all of our societies, that's always been something so unimaginable for so many people. When really, when you look at the human condition and our existence, man has had to come up with so many systems, so many different ways of believing to stave off our fear, our confusion of what we are, who we are, and really the futility of our human existence. Being that we're the only creatures on this planet that are fully and completely conscious, not only of our own existence, but everything else. We're able to observe all the other creatures, how they live, how they die, and we're able to look up. We're able to look up and realize that there's something else out there besides this earth that we're living on. And so we realize even more how insignificant we are. But that would be a whole nother topic for another day, all of that. But going back to religion, Christianity particularly, and the Jehovah's Witnesses can't escape from this. We have many, many examples, and they're used because if you look at the Bible and you read it and you study it, you'll find out that it doesn't mention anything specific on the topic of taking one's life. You'll notice that I'm trying to be careful with my wording because, as far as I've seen, YouTube's not on board with the current administration's, you know, giddiness about restoring free speech. So I don't want to get banned or, demonetized or anything like that. So got to be careful with our words. There are several examples, though, in the Bible of people that did so. And particularly, they're not people who are held in high esteem in the Bible. One being King Saul, and the other one, Judas Iscariot. So in the case of King Saul, after a disastrous battle with the Philistines in 1 Samuel, last chapter of 1 Samuel, when Saul was cornered and surrounded by the Philistines, he ended up running himself through with his own sword and died. And we know in the case of Judas, the traitor, he ended up hanging himself, and not really clear which one killed him exactly. If it was that he hung himself, but then the branch that he hung himself from gave way, broke, and he fell, landing on the rocks below and spilling his intestines all over. So either way, he died. And those examples, of course, the witnesses use them quite often to show the end of a person who killed himself. But when you look at those accounts, of course, Saul or Judas were not condemned because of the act of killing themselves. They were already condemned before that. And in the case of Judas, you could make the argument. Of course, one of the things that I make arguments against the erroneous teaching of Christianity, of this concept of free will, which you certainly do not have. And if you read the Bible, you'll find out that the Bible is all about predestination. It's not about people making their own decisions. Everything since the moment that Adam and Eve sinned in the Bible, and the Lord, Yahweh, whatever name you want to give him, pronounced the first prophecy of the seed and the woman and the serpent getting bruised in the head and in the heel and all that stuff. From that moment on, everything became a part of God's plan for restoration, salvation, everything from that moment on was a part of his plan. And every single person, every single situation that is mentioned in the Bible, in one way or another, was predestined. It was under the control of God to eventually lead to the birth of Messiah, and then his ministry and his betrayal and his death and resurrection, and then from there on. So in the case of Judas, what was going to happen with him had to happen. Jesus already knew from the beginning who it was. He knew who was going to betray him, and he let it happen because it had to happen. Judas was condemned because of the fact that he was unfaithful, because he was a traitor. And going back to what I mentioned during the live stream, if you read Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy. Of course, that was drilled into people's psyche because Judas is in the very, very, very last, the deepest ring of hell, where Satan himself is sitting encased in ice, not fire, interestingly. There's lots of ice and cold in Dante's Inferno. And Judas is the ultimate, I mean, he's the very last person in hell, and he's inside of Satan's mouth, and Satan's chewing on him over and over and over again for all eternity and grinding him up in his bones and flesh, and while he's in torment and screaming. And so that's the fate of traitors. So all that imagery plays into why there's so much stigma among Christians when it comes to people taking their lives. So you have to look at why. What happens? Well, one of the mistakes that we make as adults, and the older we get, the worse it gets, is that we look through the filter of our entire lives. And when you see a certain situation and you give an opinion on it or you analyze it, you have no choice but to analyze it through the filter of all of the experiences and your wisdom and your mistakes and everything that you have now at the point of life where you are in the moment. And so, obviously, when you see a situation of a young person, or like my daughter, for example, that tried to take her life, you look at that, and of course, you have all these reasons and answers, and why did you do? You hear this. Here, this happens a lot. People here in Honduras, Christians are the worst ones that will come out and judge you and criticize you, and what a stupid decision, and now you're not going to be forgiven, and now you're going straight to hell, and all these things, and how stupid, there's so much to live for, and this and that. But of course, those are adults giving their opinion, not children, adults. And for us, you can look at that and say, well, yeah, I've been through so many things. I've been through heartbreaks, I've been through breakups, and I've been through betrayals and a divorce and this and that and all these things. But I have years of experience and strength that comes from that's behind me. Okay. And a person who's 13, 14, 16 years old has none of that. None of that. So when you look at a young person who, perhaps, like in the case of my daughter, had never experienced any major crisis in her life or emotion like that of being completely rejected. We're not talking about, breaking up with a boyfriend or things like that, which in the end, those are decisions that you make. And little by little, all of those experiences and the hurt that it causes, you get those experiences, they build up, and you get fortified from each one. And for most people, taking your life is not something that even comes into your mind. Or if it does, in moments where you're really, really low or maybe depressed, you entertain those thoughts. But of course, you don't think about actually doing it, or you dismiss it right away, or go, man, what am I thinking? No, it's. And you have other things to go to, a faith, you know I've been out of the witnesses for what, 11 years now, and I pursued other avenues of faith and have built up my own system that works for me when it comes to faith. Not with anything to do with religion or organized religion or going to church. And I'm not saying anything against that. If anybody out there does that, if it works for you, great. But I've come to find what works for me. So I've gone through all of those experiences. She hasn't. She hasn't at all. And that's the situation that many, many young people. So now go back, instead of judging people according to who you are right now, go back to when you were 12, 13, 14, 15 years old and try to, if it's possible, imagine at that moment, what did you know? How were you? How much knowledge did you have? How much, life experience did you have to handle a situation like this? And of course, other factors that come in is that each person is different. We all have different personalities. We all have different ways of dealing with things, emotions. Things affect us differently. So if you're one of those people that just brushes things off and that wouldn't bother me, not everyone's like you. Some people it does bother. Some people are more sensitive. Some people are empaths and they're more in connection with the energies of other people, which is a sign of higher intelligence. That whole, that's what a stupid decision. I wouldn't do that. That's like the Toni Morris type, Sam Hurd type. Your best isn't good enough. Do more. Just blockhead, belligerent, that elder attitude. Oh, you're sad, huh? Well, are you going out in service? What are you doing? Oh, well, if you just sit at home and, we've all heard that before. So, all those situations, that's why the knee jerk response from Christians, especially, is condemnation when we talk about taking one's life. And yet, there are many cases, there are many examples in the Bible of other faithful servants of the Lord that voiced very openly and had thoughts of wanting to die. So attempting it or thinking about it certainly is not condemnable. And even if a person does, well, what is it a result of? It's a result of a clinical condition, depression. There's always taking one's life is simply it's a symptom of a much bigger illness, sickness, problem that was already there. Everybody focuses on the end result. Nobody looks at what the problem was. Either because, again, they don't want to, they don't care, or they're not willing to, or they don't know what to do. So I'll just turn a blind eye and then I'll condemn the person when they actually succeed. But behind someone taking their life, there's a whole nother situation going on and people involved, signs that are being given and ignored. That's the true problem and illness, not the act itself. It's like a person dying. Oh, they died of a heart attack. Well, yeah, but why? Because there were a whole situation going on of bad habits, of diet, of all these things, a lifestyle that led up to that. Same thing happens with this. So it's very easy. Judging is so easy, and that's why Christians are commanded. It's not just a suggestion, it's a commandment. So every time a Christian judges in any shape or form, they're being disobedient. And you will be so judged according to how you judge. Jesus said that very clearly. So what I would say to people is, if you're not Christians, if you're not up on, the reasons, if you're not doing your homework, if you're not willing to, or you're not interested in gaining more knowledge, studying what's behind anxiety disorder and depression and taking one's life and all of those things and how they're related, if you're not willing to do any of that, then at the very least, keep your mouth shut. Don't give opinions on situations that you are not willing to learn about for yourself. Because as I said, there's many factors behind when that happens to a person. And if it happens to so many people, then something else must be going on. But that's what happens with religious people. That's what happens with priests and pastors and people that go to church and things like that. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to deal with it because they're not willing to accept that their denomination or their church, their doctrines in part are responsible for marginalizing people, pushing them to the edges when they have mental illness, like the witnesses do. They don't want to accept that. They want to put all the blame on the victim, and then everyone gets together and they agree on that and they feel good with their flock mentality. Everybody criticizes the fallen person. So it's kind of like, I don't know how exactly it would be translated in English, but there's a saying in Spanish that everybody makes logs out of a fallen tree. So it's that imagery of when a tree falls and all the neighbors come along with their machetes and their axes and they start chopping up the tree and taking the wood home, right? So when a person is fallen, everybody criticizes them. Everybody talks about them. It's easy to talk about somebody when they're fallen, but nobody helps. That's what religion has given us. And that's what drives people because of the fact that there's so little understanding and compassion when a person feels like that, because they know that if they tell somebody, they're going to get criticized. They're going to get scolded probably. Why do you think about that? What are you thinking about that for? How could you do that? Look what happened with my daughter. And so they just decide to not say anything. That's usually what happens. You definitely know what would happen if you go to the elders. God forbid. So what we have to do is practice more grace, practice more compassion and understanding, and leave condemnation out of it. Because if you read your Bible and you're in Christ and you've entered in his grace, there is no condemnation. There is no condemnation, regardless of what your fallen flesh does. That's not your spirit. And as long as we're on this earth and we continue here, that is going to continue to happen. So as Jesus so aptly put it, if you're without sin, then by all means, throw the first rock. Simple as that. That puts end to all the discussion, right? But so few people practice that. So again, I want to thank everybody. Thank you for watching this video. And remember that all the means are activated. If anybody has the will, if you feel moved to support the cause with Cosette and the legal battle that I'm entering into to try and get custody of her. So there's the on the video down below, there's the thanks. You can donate through that. on the regular page on the channel where the information is, where it says I traded in a golden crown for Rolex. If you touch on that, there's also the option of wire transfers through MoneyGram or Western Union. The instructions are there, my email address. And of course, a huge support is also watching the videos. Watch the video all the way through. Give it a like. And if at all possible, take a look at the ads. I know I'm asking too much. But thank you, everybody, for your kind words, for your support, for your encouragement. And the fight continues. We live to fight another day. Thank you for watching the CO Visit, and I'll see you guys in the next one.